The palace had not yet awakened, but it was never truly asleep. Even before dawn, Buckingham Palace breathed with ritual. Corridors hummed softly with hidden systems. Guards rotated with ceremonial precision. Somewhere deep within the stone and history, silver trays were already being prepared, polished until they reflected candlelight like still water. Morning, in this place, was not a time. It was a discipline, and on this morning, discipline would be tested. The camera drifts low through a corridor lined with portraits. Kings, queens, heirs frozen in oil and authority. Their eyes follow nothing, yet somehow see everything. At the far end of the hall, beyond the final security threshold, lies a nursery wing. Warm light, soft fabrics, a sanctuary designed to hold innocence at arm's length from the world's weight. Inside, Princess Charlotte sleeps. Her breathing is shallow, too shallow. At first, it is nothing more than a change in rhythm. So slight, it could be missed by anyone not trained to notice the fragile line between rest and distress. The night, Nanny pauses at the doorway, listening. She has performed this ritual hundreds of times. Count the breaths, check the blanket, adjust the nightlight. Routine is safety. Safety is trust. She steps closer. Charlotte's face is pale, not the flushed warmth of deep sleep, but a porcelain stillness that catches the eye. Her lips part slightly, as if trying to form a word that never arrives. One small hand twitches, then stills. The nanny reaches out. Her skin is cool, not cold, but wrong. The palace does not believe in panic. Panic belongs to crowds, not institutions built to outlast centuries. But there are protocols, ancient ones, written for the moments when calm becomes dangerous. The nanny presses a discreet call button beneath the crib. No alarm sound. No bells ring. Instead, a silent signal moves through hidden channels, alerting exactly 3 people within the palace walls. A private physician, a senior protection officer, and the night supervisor of the household staff. Within 60 seconds, the corridor outside the nursery fills, not with chaos, but with motion that is almost reverent. Shoes whisper across carpet. Radios remain silent. Doors open and close with practiced restraint. The physician kneels beside the crib, fingers already at Charlotte's wrist, eyes trained not just on the child, but on everything around her. The bottle on the side table, the cup beside it, empty, milk, warm, fortified, prepared exactly according to instruction. Every night, the same way, the same source, the same routine. Charlotte stirs weakly as the doctor gently lifts her eyelids. Pupils sluggish. Response delayed. The physician does not speak at first. Words carry weight here, and careless ones echo longer than intended. Finally, quietly, she sedated. The sentence lands like a fracture beneath marble. Silent, but catastrophic. From what? The protection officer asks. I don't know yet, the doctor replies. But this is not normal fatigue. This is chemical. Chemical. The word does not belong in a nursery. The milk bottle is sealed, capped, placed into a sterile bag. The cup follows. Nothing is touched without documentation. Every motion is logged, time-stamped, preserved. Trust, once broken, must be reconstructed molecule by molecule. Charlotte is carried, not rushed, through the corridor toward the private medical suite. Her head rests against the doctor's shoulder. She murmurs something incoherent, a sound, not a word. The palace remains quiet. No announcements, no raised voices. The illusion of peace must be preserved until truth is known. But somewhere, deep within the building, a secure phone vibrates. Prince William answers on the second ring. He is not in uniform, not yet a king, just a father in a darkened room, already awake in a way parents are, half listening even in sleep. Yes, he says. There's a pause on the other end, not because the speaker hesitates, but because protocol demands respect for the moment that is about to change everything. Sir, the voice begins, measuring controlled. There's been an incident in the nursery. William sits up. Charlotte. Yes, sir. The silence that follows is heavier than any answer. She is stable. The voice continues quickly, but unwell. The physician believes she has been sedated. We are investigating the source. William's hand tightens around the phone. His breathing slows, not from calm, but from command. This is how he was trained. Emotion later. Duty first. I'm on my way, he says. He does not ask how bad it is. He does not ask who is responsible. Those questions come later. For now, there's only one thing that matters. His daughter. As William moves through the palace, the camera follows from behind, his silhouette framed by dim lights and towering walls. Every step echoes with memory. This building has seen grief before. Too much of it. He enters a medical suite to find Charlotte resting beneath soft lights, monitors whispering her vital signs in steady intervals. Catherine is already there, her face composed in that particular way that signals fear held tightly in check. William crosses the room without a word. He takes Charlotte's hand. It is warmer now. "Daddy," Charlotte murmurs faintly, eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Relief hits like oxygen after submersion. William leans close. "I'm here," he whispers. "You're safe." But even as he says it, the weight of uncertainty presses in. Safe from what? The physician clears his throat softly. "Sir, we've run preliminary screens. There are traces of a mild sedative, not dangerous in isolation, but inappropriate, especially administered repeatedly." Repeatedly. William looks up. How long? At least several nights. Possibly longer. The room seems to narrow. Not physically, but morally. This was not a single mistake. Not an accident. This was a pattern. Who had access? Catherine asks, her voice steady but edged with steel. "Only cleared household staff." The protection officer replies. "Specifically the night nanny." The word hangs in the air. The nanny. Trusted. Vetted. Background check to a degree most citizens never experience. A woman who sang lullabies, who soothed nightmares, who prepared the milk every evening with ritualistic care. William exhales slowly. "Lock it down," he says, quietly. The order is not loud, but it is absolute. No one leave the grounds without clearance. All internal communications are sealed. This stays inside the family until we know exactly what we're dealing with. "Yes, sir." The palace shifts again, not visibly but structurally. Systems reroute. Logs are frozen. Surveillance archives duplicate themselves into secure vaults. This is not a scandal yet. It is an investigation. As dawn approaches, the first light filters to the high windows, painting the room in pale gold. Charlotte sleeps more deeply now, the sedative wearing off under careful supervision. William remains by her side. He is not thinking like a future king. Not yet. He is thinking like a father who realizes too late that trust can be weaponized. Somewhere else in the palace, the night nanny sits alone in a small staff room, unaware that the walls around her are already closing. Not with anger, but with certainty. Back in the nursery, a junior medical assistant cleans the sink used to rinse the milk cup. As she reaches for the drain catch, her fingers brush against something small. Plastic. Transparent. She pauses. Carefully, she lifts it into the light. A vial. Unlabeled. Unlogged. Empty. Her breath catches, not in fear, but in understanding. She seals it in a sterile pouch and hands it silently to protection officer. No words are exchanged. None are needed. The camera pulls back to the corridors once more. Past the portraits, past the guards, past the gates that still stand closed against the waking city. Inside, the crown has already begun to respond. Not with fury, but with something far colder. The palace had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Charlotte rested in the private suite, her breathing steady. Yet every monitor beep reminded those in the room that stability was fragile. Outside, the corridors were eerily silent. Curtains swayed faintly in the early morning draft, but no ordinary light touched the palace walls. Not yet. Here, every shadow carried meaning, and every sound demanded attention. For Prince William, the early hours brought no comfort. Sleep was abandoned long ago. Duty, he knew, never rested. Even a father's instinct had to yield to protocol. Every action, every movement, was measured against centuries of rules designed to protect not just a child, but an institution. And in this moment, the two were inseparable. A discreet signal summoned the palace's inner circle. Private physicians, security chiefs, legal counsel, and a handful of senior household officers convened in the war room, a space as austere as it was secure. Maps of the estate, personnel schedules, and surveillance feeds were already displayed on screens behind glass, reflecting a web of activity that most would never notice. The room smelled faintly of paper and antiseptic, of polished floors and anticipation. The chief protection officer, a man whose tenure spanned decades of royal emergencies, spoke first. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried gravity. We treat this as a potential breach. Internal containment only. No staff exits. No communication with external authorities until cleared. William listened, noting each word, each tone. His own authority was unquestioned here, but the weight of every decision was tangible. One misstep could spiral into scandal, or worse. The investigation began with the simplest elements. The logs. CCTV feeds spanning nursery access points were cross-referenced with staff schedules. Motion sensors, silent alarms, and door records were layered like a forensic map. Every entry, every exit, every unscheduled movement was scrutinized. Hours passed as technicians traced every interaction. The palace, built for grandeur, became a laboratory. The camera captures a meticulous process. Hands flipping folders, eyes scanning screens, pens marking anomalies. There is no drama in this work, only precision. And in precision, the truth waits. The nanny's history was next. On paper, she was flawless. No criminal record, glowing references, decades of experience. But when her previous employment files were examined, subtle inconsistencies emerged. Unexplained transfers, minor complaints that had been quietly settled, gaps in documented performance. None suggested intent, yet patterns whispered caution. The senior physician reviewed Charlotte's medical records meticulously, noting minor inconsistencies with prescribed supplements. A small gap here, an unexplained dosage there. Nothing definitive, yet the pattern was undeniable. It was like reading a story in punctuation marks. Absence where presence was expected. Irregularity where uniformity should have prevailed. Throughout it all, William insisted on discretion. The palace could not withstand public exposure. Not now, when whispers could become headlines and speculation could overshadow protection. Every investigator, every officer, worked behind closed doors, their presence known only to a select few. Even staff members within the household were unaware that a silent operation had begun. But the shadows yielded clues. An unlogged vial found near the nursery sink. Tiny residues on a feeding cup. Fingerprints matched precisely, but not exclusively. Access, opportunity, and motive, all subtle, all circumstantial. Then the breakthrough came. The classified toxicology report arrived, secured within a leather-bound folder stamped with the highest clearance seal. The chemical signature was unmistakable. Mild sedative. Administered repeatedly. Not a single incident, but a pattern extending over days, possibly weeks. The room held its collective breath. Intentional, the senior physician said quietly. Not accidental. Someone wanted this effect. Silence followed. William's mind raced. Disbelief flickered into a cold calculation. Internal containment was no longer sufficient. The palace must act, carefully, methodically, but decisively. He convened a separate briefing with legal counsel. The conversation was clinical, precise, as if each word were a scalpel. Options were weighed. Immediate removal from duty, medical suspension, full criminal referral. The decision balanced compassion, institutional preservation, and legal precedent. Meanwhile, the security team retraced the nanny's interactions across the palace. Each corridor she walked, each room she entered, was cross-checked against access logs. Nothing was left unchecked. Even minor anomalies were documented. The camera pans over the data, a latticework of movement, each line representing a human presence in a palace designed to eliminate uncertainty. Hours blurred. Days and the palace's hidden hours can feel like lifetimes. Meals were taken in silence. Phones vibrated quietly in pockets. Updates were whispered into secure lines. Every heartbeat counted. Every decision mattered. Finally, the evidence could no longer be ignored. Charlotte had been administered sedatives intentionally. The fact alone reframed the incident from internal oversight to deliberate breach. William's face hardened. The decision could not be delayed. Protocol demanded a measured response, not retaliation. Not spectacle. Justice executed in alignment with duty and tradition. The household, normally bustling with ceremonial preparation, was transformed. Ordinary routines, breakfast, floor polishing, deliveries continued, but each movement carried an undercurrent of tension. Staff members unconsciously recognized a shift. Something was being investigated. Something that transcended simple error. Even the nanny, when discreetly summoned for a preliminary discussion, was unaware of the full scope. She answered questions with practiced composure, unaware that every statement, every hesitation, every glance was being logged, analyzed, and preserved. And as the day ended, William stepped into the nursery once more. Charlotte's eyes followed him, trust unbroken despite the invisible storm. His gaze fell on the small vial again, sealed in a secure envelope, a reminder that appearances could deceive and innocence must be shielded from unseen hands. The palace, at dusk, seemed to breathe again, but only superficially. Within its walls, nothing had truly settled. Every clock ticked not toward rest, but toward the inevitable confrontation between duty and betrayal. The oak-paneled room smelled faintly of polished wood and candle wax, the scent lingering like a reminder that centuries of authority had passed through this very space. Prince William entered quietly, his steps measured, but his presence immediately filled the chamber. Charlotte was now resting in a nearby suite, shielded by physicians and monitors, yet the shadow of recent events clung to every corner. Behind closed doors, the palace's legal authority extended in ways that no civilian courtroom could match. Here, in the sanctum of the crown, law and mercy intersected with a rigidity few could ever challenge. The nanny, once entrusted with the most sacred duty of guarding innocence, stood in the center of the room. Her hands were folded, her gaze composed but wavering under the weight of scrutiny. The senior legal advisor began methodically, almost ceremoniously. You are here under royal jurisdiction. Your actions, if proven intentional, constitute a breach of trust with consequences under both civil and royal law. You will be questioned for clarity, and your cooperation is expected. The nanny's voice was steady, almost rehearsed. I only wanted to help. Charlotte was anxious, sometimes unsettled at night. I thought the small doses would calm her. Nothing more. Harmless, only to make her sleep peacefully. William's jaw tightened. You gave her sedatives. Repeatedly. Over days. Were these actions approved by anyone? No, she whispered, her eyes flicking briefly to the legal advisors. I thought I was helping. The room fell into silence. The only sound was a faint creak of wood under William's foot. The echo was almost accusatory. Intentions alone did not absolve actions, and here, in the sanctum of royal law, consequences could not be ignored. Evidence was presented in cold, precise form. Logs of nightly doses, fingerprints on vials, discrepancies in recorded procedures. Every anomaly, every inconsistency, was laid bare with meticulous care. There was no dramatization, no theatrical flourish, only the undeniable accumulation of fact. The nanny's composure began to fracture. She shifted from one foot to another, eyes darting to the documents, to the faces around her, searching for understanding, for compassion. William watched quietly, noting each flicker of fear, every attempt to rationalize. The line between mercy and law was a razor, and he was already poised on its edge. Did anyone instruct you to administer these sedatives? William asked again, his voice low, steady. Did you receive guidance from anyone in the household? No, no one, she replied, her tone pleading. I took responsibility myself. The advisors exchanged subtle glances. This was not an admission of innocence, but a claim of misguided judgment, a plea for mercy. Yet in her eyes, there was more, a shadow of something darker. A confidential report from the palace archives was placed on the table. It contained prior warnings, minor incidents that had been quietly resolved at previous posts, subtle behavioral concerns, and financial stressors. The pattern emerged. Opportunity, motive, and repeated decision-making that skirted, but did not yet fully break. The boundaries of trust. William leaned forward, his hand resting lightly on the table, but his expression was resolute. You were responsible for the care of a child who cannot speak for herself. Her trust was placed entirely in you. That trust was violated. Do you understand the gravity of this? I did what I thought was right, she whispered. I never meant to harm her. Never. The words hung in the air, fragile and implausible. William felt a tug of paternal empathy, the instinct to forgive, to understand, but duty demanded clarity, not comfort. Each pause, each hesitation in her explanation, eroded the credibility of her claims. The physician spoke next, detailing precise medical effects of the sedative. Lethargy, slowed reflexes, subtle impairment, all traceable to deliberate administration. Each description was clinical, yet beneath it lay an unspoken moral indictment. This was not negligence. This was calculated interference with the well-being of the child. Minutes stretched into hours. The room became a crucible of morality and legality. William observed silently, allowing the narrative of evidence and testimony to unfold without interruption. Every detail, the timestamps, the chemical residues, the behavioral inconsistencies, was a small hammer, slowly chiseling away at any remaining justification. Finally, the emotional midpoint arrived. The nanny, her defenses crumbling, admitted to repeated dosing, claiming it was stress and exhaustion that clouded judgment, a misguided attempt at care. She spoke of sleepless nights, pressure from the household, and fear of reprimand. She offered apologies, but the weight of her admissions resonated with a moral clarity that words alone could not obscure. William's internal struggle was palpable. Compassion for a caregiver wrestled with the unyielding imperative to protect Charlotte. His voice, when it came, was firm but measured. Intentions do not replace action. Care does not justify harm. The Crown must act, not in anger, but in responsibility. The advisors nodded, recording the decision. The nanny's fate would not be dictated by emotion, but by law, evidence, and the immutable duty of the monarchy. Her dismissal was insufficient. The breach was too severe. The matter would advance to formal prosecution under royal authority. The nanny's face blanched. She realized the gravity before words could express it. William remained composed, yet inside, the tension was electric, a collision of duty, fatherhood, and the moral line that separated mercy from law. As the questioning concluded, she was escorted quietly from the chamber. Every step echoed through the oak panel hall, a stark contrast to the quiet, measured resolve of the Crown. Outside, palace staff moved with rehearsed precision, unaware that a single decision had already defined the trajectory of justice within these walls. William paused before leaving the room. He gazed at the documents, the logs, the evidence of repeated transgression. The weight of centuries of responsibility pressed upon him. This moment, he knew, would echo in the chambers of history. Every choice, every command, was a reflection of the man he was becoming. Not just a father, but a future king. The sun had dipped low. The palace, a fortress of tradition and discipline, seemed almost serene. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet storm had been unleashed. The line between mercy and law had been drawn, and all involved would feel its gravity in ways both immediate and lasting. The palace had grown quieter, but not peaceful. Shadows lengthened across the oak floors and gilded walls as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the horizon. In the hush of the corridors, the absence of ordinary bustle felt conspicuous. A deliberate calm, a pause before irrevocable action. Here, in the corridors that had witnessed centuries of sovereignty, decisions were made not with spectacle, but with solemnity. Prince William walked alone through the silent halls, the weight of responsibility pressing with every measured step. His mind replayed the earlier confrontation, the nanny's trembling explanations, her claims of misguided care, the clinical evidence of repeated sedative administration. In these corridors, law and duty intertwined. There was no room for sentiment, no space for doubt. At the secure council chamber, advisors and legal counsel were already gathered. The discussion that followed was precise, devoid of emotion, yet loaded with consequence. Permissions, previously ceremonial, were now instruments of enforcement. Royal warrants, once reserved for matters of state espionage or high treason, were invoked to allow formal prosecution within the household. This was extraordinary, rare, unprecedented in modern memory, but necessary. The legal advisor spoke first, laying out the framework. Under the royal household order, the Crown may authorize prosecution when internal breach compromises the safety of minors or the continuity of a monarchy. This requires explicit authorization from the sovereign or acting head of the household. In this case, Prince William. He paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle. Every advisor present understood the gravity. This was more than legal procedure. It was a declaration that the Crown would not tolerate betrayal, that innocence would be defended by law and precedent alike. William's decision was deliberate. He signed the warrant personally, his pen tracing the line with cold resolve. There was no flourish, no dramatic gesture, only certainty. In that moment, he was neither father nor monarch, but both at once. Protector, adjudicator, and executor of justice. The nanny's past began to unravel under meticulous review. Financial records revealed minor but persistent distress. Psychological evaluations indicated stressors long buried under superficial competence. A report surfaced from years earlier, quietly filed, largely forgotten, detailing a minor incident in another household that, in retrospect, suggested a troubling pattern. Every revelation reinforced the inevitability of action. There could be no mitigation, no moral compromise. Charlotte's safety and the integrity of the Crown depended on absolute adherence to law and protocol. As the warrant was executed, security officers discreetly escorted the nanny, ensuring minimal disruption to the household. The camera pans through empty corridors, the polished floors reflecting the faint glimmer of lamplight. The motion is procedural, almost ceremonial, a testament to the discipline embedded in every fiber of the palace. William remained behind, gazing at the documents now sealed in secure files. There was no satisfaction in this act, only recognition of necessity. Leadership, he understood, was often defined by decisions that carried no applause, only consequence. Outside the room, palace staff carried on with rehearsed precision. Breakfasts were prepared, carpets were brushed, doors opened and closed with the quiet authority of centuries-old ritual. Life proceeded as if nothing had changed, but every motion, every glance, bore the subtle imprint of a household that had glimpsed betrayal and responded without hesitation. Hours later, as dusk yielded to night, a private letter emerged from the Queen's archives. Its parchment was delicate, the ink faded but legible. The document chronicled a similar dilemma faced by a monarch long past, when loyalty conflicts with duty, when mercy could imperil innocence. The letter framed punishment not as vengeance, but as the measured exercise of responsibility, a moral compass calibrated to protect the vulnerable above all else. William read it silently, understanding that his actions were not isolated, but part of a continuum of responsibility stretching across centuries. Authority, he realized, is inseparable from consequence. Every decision ripples outward, touching those beyond the immediate moment, shaping the institution for generations. The night grew deeper. Charlotte, safe and recovering, slept quietly under watchful eyes. The palace, though outwardly serene, hummed with the silent energy of calculated action. Every officer, every advisor, and every member of the household understood that the Crown had asserted its authority, not with anger, but with measured, immutable resolve. Even the nanny's departure was quiet. There were no accusations shouted, no public spectacle. She left under legal escort, the weight of evidence and warrant inescapable. Outside, the world remained unaware of the precise gravity unfolding within Buckingham's walls. Inside, however, every heartbeat acknowledged the truth. Betrayal had been met with law, not emotion, and justice, measured and deliberate, had prevailed. The chamber grew still once more. William closed the ledger, his gaze lingering on the sealed files. He understood, with a clarity sharpened by experience and responsibility, that leadership was as much about restraint as it was action. Decisions like these would define not just a reign, but the ethical legacy of a sovereign. The courtroom was unlike any public space. No press, no cameras, no cheering crowds. It existed in a realm between law and monarchy, where justice moved quietly, deliberately, measured by centuries of protocol. Only those with clearance, loyalty, or necessity were present. each figure aware of the magnitude of what was unfolding. Prince William did not attend in person. The decision required neither display nor dramatization. Leadership, he had learned, often spoke in restraint. The crown's authority was absolute, but its demonstration was rarely theatrical. To intervene openly would diminish the moral force of the judgment, turning solemn responsibility into spectacle. Instead, he followed discreet reports, updates delivered through secure channels, ensuring that every legal action aligned precisely with procedure and duty. The court convened in silence. The nanny, once trusted implicitly, now stood alone before the assembled legal authorities. Her demeanor had shifted, confidence replaced by a measured fear, her calm previously rehearsed now tempered by the weight of irrevocable consequences. Every gesture was noted, every pause catalogued. In this chamber, actions carried as much moral significance as words. Evidence was presented again, meticulously, in front of those empowered to act. Logs of nightly sedative doses, fingerprints on vials, surveillance footage, prior warnings buried in employment records. Each piece, when combined, told a story of repeated intentional breach. The court listened. No murmurs, no reactions, only acknowledgement of facts and the silent weight of authority. Witness statements, those recorded during previous investigative sessions, were read aloud, emphasizing pattern over accusation. Statements were clinical, but moral clarity emerged from their sequence. The repeated dosing, the concealment, the rationale claimed by the nanny, all pointed to the same undeniable conclusion. The line between error and intent had been crossed. At length, the verdict was delivered. Imprisonment, lifetime exclusion from royal service, records sealed, inaccessible to the public. The sentence was absolute, yet devoid of flourish. It carried authority without noise, consequence without spectacle. In this silence, the crown's moral power resonated far more strongly than any public display could achieve. Meanwhile, Charlotte continued her recovery under vigilant care. Her innocence, though preserved, bore the subtle imprint of what had occurred. There were no overt traumas, no visible scars, yet the household approached every routine with renewed vigilance. Toys arranged with deliberate care, nightly bottles prepared under triple checks. Every corridor, every doorway, every shadow watched not in fear, but in protective resolve. William observed all of this from behind secure walls. The reports painted a quiet portrait of restoration. A daughter safe, a household stabilized, and the institution's integrity maintained. But he also knew that order had returned not because emotions were healed, but because systems had functioned. Loyalty had been tested, betrayal identified, and the machinery of the monarchy had responded without hesitation. The nanny's removal was discreet. No staff member outside those with clearance knew her departure had occurred. Her presence vanished from schedules, corridors, and routines. The palace had acted, but invisibly, justice executed in alignment with centuries of tradition. As the day drew to a close, the corridors filled with ordinary motion again. Guards conducted their rotations. Housekeeping attended to their duties. The palace hummed with normalcy, though beneath the surface, the tension of earlier events lingered, a quiet undercurrent of vigilance that ensured the safety of all who resided within. William allowed himself a brief moment in Charlotte's suite. She played quietly, surrounded by familiar toys, her laughter fragile yet restorative. Catherine watched, calm but alert. Their eyes met briefly, conveying understanding without words. What occurred would not be spoken of publicly, yet its memory would shape every action moving forward. In that moment, the crown's lesson was clear. Protection sometimes demands solitude, and leadership requires decisions that carry no applause. The machinery of authority had acted perfectly, swift, discreet, decisive. Yet the personal cost, subtle but real, reminded all present that the burden of safeguarding innocence rarely comes without moral weight. Outside, the palace gates remained closed. A city unaware of precise gravity unfolding inside passed by, indifferent to the invisible vigilance that had preserved a child, defended tradition, and upheld law. Inside, the crown's work was done, for now. Quietly, imperceptibly, perfectly. The palace was quiet now, but not empty. Its walls, steeped in centuries of memory, seemed to exhale slowly, as though relieved that the immediate crisis had passed. The corridors were still, but each footstep carried the weight of reflection. Each flickering candle a reminder of the lives and decisions that had moved within these stone walls. Prince William walked alone through the dim halls, pausing often, his hand brushing lightly against the polished banisters. In the silence, he felt the echoes of every choice made over the past days. The confrontation with the nanny, the signing of warrants, the unseen vigilance that had protected Charlotte. Authority, he realized, was rarely loud. Its power resided in the decisions no one applauded, in the burdens borne alone, in the quiet enforcement of justice. Charlotte played nearby under watchful care, her laughter fragile, yet illuminating the suite like sunlight through a high window. William observed her from a distance, aware that this fragile normalcy was a testament not only to procedures followed, but to the unspoken responsibilities of leadership. Protection, he understood, was not an act of heroism. It was an accumulation of small, precise decisions made in solitude. Catherine joined him, her presence calm yet grounding. Words were few, but their shared glance spoke volumes. The lessons of the past week, trust, vigilance, accountability, were etched deeply into the rhythm of the household. Together, they understood that the crown's work was often invisible, its victories measured not by celebration, but by stability restored. William lingered in the private library, its shelves heavy with history. He pulled a volume from the Queen's archives, turning pages that chronicled decisions made by monarchs long past. There were moments of triumph, moments of failure, but all shared a common thread: the weight of responsibility, the isolation of command, the moral clarity required when human emotion collided with duty. He reflected on the nanny's transgression. Compassion and mercy had existed in tension with law and protection. In the end, law had prevailed, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The crown's power was inseparable from its accountability, its ethical rigor measured in actions rather than words. Leadership, William realized, was often defined not by what was seen, but by what was quietly upheld. In the nursery, Charlotte rested. Her innocence remained intact. Yet William knew the memory of these events, though unconscious to her, would shape the environment around her. Safety, he understood, was maintained not through reassurance alone, but through the meticulous orchestration of duty and vigilance. The palace at night became a symbol of continuity. Outside, the city slept unaware. Inside, light still glimmered in select windows. Guards paced with silent precision. Documents were filed, routines double-checked. Every action reaffirmed that tradition and responsibility were inseparable. The crown did not announce its triumphs. It ensured they existed. William paused before the portraits of past monarchs. Kings and queens stared down through oil and time, silent witnesses to the choices he had made. Their gaze reminded him that power carried moral weight beyond the individual. To lead was to accept that solitude was inevitable, and that the decisions which mattered most were often those made in isolation, without acknowledgement or applause. He returned to Charlotte's suite once more, quietly observing her peaceful sleep. There was a serenity here, but it was hard won. The lessons of recent days, the vigilance, the confrontation, the unwavering adherence to duty would remain with him, etched into memory, forming the foundation of the ruler he would become. The night stretched on. The palace seemed almost to breathe with him, a living monument to legacy, responsibility, and the protection of innocence. William understood, finally, that leadership was measured not by spectacle or acclaim, but by the courage to act when no one watched, when no one could intervene, when no one could share the burden. And in this quiet reflection, he accepted the enduring truth. A crown's weight is born in silence, and the moral victories of sovereign are often invisible to the world. Tomorrow, another secret would surface, another test of trust and authority, proving once again that for a future king, the lessons of silence are the ones that endure the longest.